Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. Tonight I'm joined by Kevin McCluskey, Laura Bradburn. No matter what the score is, we do the post-match bulletins. And to be honest with you, there hasn't been too many disappointing ones since Ange Postecoglou took over, Laura. But tonight, we shared 6 goals with Real Madrid. What can I say? We'll start off with Jota. Have you ever seen, in all the years that you've watched football, someone scoring not just a consolation goal, but you're 5-0 down, when the goal meant as much as that did to Jota? I mean, I'm going to take that with me. I mean, the look on his face, I thought he was in tears. What a strike!
Listen, I think the thing about it, and we can be as cynical as we like, and we could sit here and quite rightly take apart some of the performances that we saw tonight. But at the end of the day, some of those players will never play at a venue like that again. They'll never play. Some of them might never play in the Champions League again. You've got to understand, for a kid from Portugal, especially from that part of the world, to score a free kick at the Bernabeu, regardless of the context of it. And let's not forget, the context of the majority of the goals was nothing to do with him, because he was sitting on the bench for most of them. He's come on and had his moment, and yes, it's a team sport, but I don't know how anybody can look at that as an individual moment and not say, that's a moment I'll remember as a Celtic supporter, even if the result is one that I want to forget.
Yeah, I mean, let's start off with the goal then, Kevin, because we'll start with a positive, right? There's comments obviously flying in, and we'll try and get as many people involved in the chat as possible, because, right, the reality of it is we've just been hammered. We've been scudded, to use a Kevin McCluskey term. We've been scudded 5-1. But we've been scudded by the finest team in Europe, right? Who, at the beginning of the game, we reminded everybody, if you needed reminded, that in the last 10 years they've won 5 European Cups, as I still like to call it. And by the way, I've got to say, I think 65 minutes in, Jerry McCulloch did mention about Real Madrid being the most successful team in the world, which I thought was an interesting wee comment. Nice dig, Jerry. Nice dig. 65 minutes in. Get it in there. But you've got to, Kevin, you've got to, like Laura was saying there, you've got Jota, right? And Jota's career, when you look at how it was progressing prior to him coming to Celtic, he was a prodigy. They inserted a €70 million clause in his contract. They thought he was going to be an absolute superstar. We pick him up first on loan, then we get him in permanently. And he scored a couple of goals in the Champions League. But that goal tonight in the Bernabeu, regardless of the score, that moment for him meant so much. But what's it going to do for the player's confidence? What's it going to do for him and his development? And because what I've been reading on social media there is, how can getting beat 5-0, 5-1 develop a team? How can it improve a team? Well, just small moments like that. Surely Jota is going to give him the belief. I thought Jota was very brave when he came on, to use something you were talking about at half-time, Kevin. It was a very brave performance by him. And surely that's going to improve him if he is still at Celtic, and I hope he is next season on this kind of level, on this platform.
Yeah, it was one of the things that we spoke about before the game, was the confidence booster it could be for one of our players to score at the Bernabeu. And it's something you can put in your CV. We spoke about it with Giakoumakis getting his goal last week. He is now a Champions League goal scorer. Might never score another goal in the Champions League again, but he's done it once. You can say it's happened. Jota has scored a goal at the Bernabeu, and not just any goal. It wasn't a tap-in, it wasn't a sclaff, it was a 25-yard free kick into the top corner against one of the best keepers in the world, who'd made 3 or 4 pretty good big saves prior to that, and who Chris Sutton 30 seconds beforehand had said there's no way he's getting beat tonight, or words to that effect. And then Jota puts one in the top corner. He's a player that, for me, kind of flattered to deceive in a few of the previous Champions League games this season. But he came on tonight in the biggest game, or the biggest stage, rather, and he was brave, to use that word again. He was brave. One of the notes I've got of him was just every time he got the ball, he attacked his man. He was willing to try and take him on, looking to put the cross in the middle, come inside, have a shot. When he wins that free kick, and it's him that wins it by a good bit of skill, He demands the ball and he knows exactly what he wants to do with it. And that takes a top player to do that, especially at a ground like the Bernabeu against Madrid when you're 5-0 down, when you might just think, what's the point? To him, there was a point. The point was to get that goal. And it's massive for him. It kind of announces him again on this stage that it's someplace that he does belong. And he'll want to come back there with us next season, I'm sure. No one else, with us.
Well, you know this. You remember back to the time, Laura, where we were privileged enough to be in that press conference when Jota signed on loan. And we were talking about various things that day. He was reminiscing about his memories of Celtic playing Benfica when he was a kid. He was talking about his hero being Ronaldo. So you guess that throughout Ronaldo's career, Jota's watched him playing for Real Madrid. He's maybe dreamt at playing at the Bernabeu, and he's done that tonight, right? And it's not like going back to the point Ange made on match day 1 in this campaign where he was asked the question about the experience of playing at the Bernabeu. He said, if I wanted to experience that, I could, be a tourist and book a tour of the stadium. He wants to do something. He wants to make an impact. And Jota did that. He did that tonight. Now, I'm just furiously checking if the final Portuguese squad's been announced yet, because remember, he was in the kind of long squad, wasn't he? He was in the long list.
This was something I was going to say, is that there's an added significance there, not just of everything you've said about what it'll mean to him as a young guy from Portugal who's watched Ronaldo at Real Madrid all those years, but there's a potential significance there that it might be the thing that gives him the edge over somebody else in getting into that final Portugal squad. If he can say, look, I can give you a threat from set pieces. I mean, he'll probably get nowhere near them if Ronaldo's in the team, but it's an option that's there. And the thing that I would say as well is like, I know people will be saying, I can't believe you get gubbed 5-1 and you're sitting talking about the one goal that you scored. But let's face it, any one of us would take scoring that one goal against Real Madrid in a 5-1 loss if we were given the opportunity. I don't care what anybody says. Would I have rather it was the goal that won us the game? Absolutely. But am I going to take it away from him for having come on when he couldn't do much to save the game, but did everything that he could and gave a moment of quality that we can at least go away with a little bit of a smile on our faces? That, to me, is the most important thing as far as, I think if you look at it, I was talking to my dad when we were watching it, and I know we've taken some hidings over the years, but for me, apart from the Real Madrid team that we played in 2012, who we obviously beat, this for me is the best team I've ever seen Celtic play on the European stage. This is not just Champions League level. I mean, they brought the Ballon d'Or winner off the bench. Like, you can't compete with that. And I get we need to improve in Europe. I get that we need to do things better. But the cards are stacked against us in a game like tonight, and we have to just try and take the positives where we can. And I hate to use the phrase, but, batten down the hatches and go again next season and see how far we can get.
We've spent the best part of 10 minutes, Kevin, talking about the main positive, which was obviously Jota's goal. We'll need to dig in about some of the things that went wrong, of course we do. But Laura stated there that this is the best side she's seen Celtic facing in her Celtic supporting life. It's a special team. It's full of absolute superstars, right? We have taken some real, again, to use your own expression, scuddings over the years, PSG, Barcelona in the main. And we've been beaten well tonight, 5-1. So what's the difference tonight then, Kevin, from a 5-1 tonight against an Ange team? And we spoke about the belief that we as Celtic fans have in Ange and the patience that we have and believing that, next season it's going to work better because we've learned lessons this season. What's the difference between the Celtic side that went out and got beat tonight and those other sides who were beaten against the likes of PSG and Barcelona?
I think the difference is the way that we've played to lose these games. Tonight, we came up against the best team in the world. 14 European Cups, 3 or 4 World Club Championships, countless other honours. You can go on and on. And we've used the phrase
15
before.
European Cups between us, Kevin. 15 between us.
Sorry, what was that, Laura?
I'm saying 15. 15 European Cups between us.
I think we'll get our one in there for sure. But aye, so sorry, we're coming up against this team that is like the best team in the world at the moment. And the phrase that we've used it in every game so far is that we've gone toe to toe with everyone. And once again, we tried to do that again tonight. And we've gone to the Bernabeu, we're getting beat 5-0 with 10 minutes to go, and we've got an attack where we've got 5 players up front. And you're thinking, one of these will turn into a goal for us. We'll get the reward that we need. And then we got it in the end. Before, if you go back to those games you've mentioned, that's kind of the Rodgers era. And the word I've always used about him in his European play was he was a fantasist because he couldn't change the way that he wanted us to play. And we were far too open. And we went out and we were getting scudded by the big teams. And you just knew it was going to happen before every single game. I couldn't have come on to a podcast like this 3, 4, 5 years ago with Rodgers in charge and tried to be confident and put on a face that we were going to win it, because I'd be lying. But now we're at a position with Ange Postecoglou in charge where you've got a man that you just know is learning with every game that he coaches in. And you can see it from game to game. And yeah, we've been beaten well tonight, but at no point did it ever feel like an embarrassment. This is almost the best 5-1 defeat you've ever had, because you can actually walk off from that and go, do you know what? For the first hour, Rio Hatate was really good. Matt O'Reilly was really solid throughout the whole game, playing in still an unfamiliar position to him. Jota's come on and been fantastic in the final 10 minutes and scored the best goal of the game. There's so many positives, actually, if you want to look at it, that you can take away. And we've had them in every single game. I think that's what it is. It's just that you've actually got belief that we're not going to be on the end of a scudding every time we walk in the park. We've actually got a chance. And if we took our chances in the other games, it's a completely different group. We've made improvements. There's final pieces of the jigsaw that still need to be bought and placed in there. But you've actually got a belief now for the first time in a long time that we're going to make those right moves.
You know, 3 of the points Kevin raised there are the 3 main positives that we will focus on, Laura, because you've got to, before we start picking away at some of the negatives. The performances of Jota, O'Reilly and Hatate, we need to focus on all 3 of those performances, because I do agree with that. That was the 3 main points that I would focus on and highlight after a game like tonight. But throwing that same point to yourself, Laura, in relation to some of the points I was seeing coming through from pundits, broadcasters, etc., on social media, for example, watching the game, keeping an eye on some comments coming in, was that, you know, when you're 4 or 5-0 down, that's when you do change your approach. That's when your philosophy has to change, because you're going to be on the end of a 6 or a 7 or an 8-0 embarrassing result. We didn't do that. So who's right and who's wrong here? Because Ange is steadfast in his belief that we don't change. There doesn't seem to be the same naivety as we had with Brendan Rodgers, where we were so open that, you know, teams could pick us apart, and, you know, we went into these games and you didn't think for a moment that you were going to compete with the teams, never mind for a 90-minute period, but for any kind of part of the game. So what's different for you, Laura, in relation to this? Is Ange right to stick to his principles? Every now and again we're going to see a night like tonight. It's not going to happen very often domestically, if at all, where a team absolutely destroys us. It will be worth it in the long run, is what Ange is preaching. Are you still believing that?
I think where where I hope it has an effect is in situations like the Shakhtar games. Teams who, to all intents and purposes, are a little bit maybe ahead of our level because of things like what Anne just said, as they've been in the Champions League more regularly than us, but aren't, save a Mudryk or something like that, a much better team than us. They're the teams that I would want us to catch, the kind of lower level but still Champions League level teams. If the approach that we have gets us results against those teams, then it'll reap its own rewards, because we'll get back into the Champions League regularly, and that'll help us bolster our bank balance, and, you know, all the fruits that come from that will be self-evident, basically. It still means that we're going to be open to situations like this against a Bayern Munich or a Barcelona or a Real Madrid. But as I've seen some people saying in the comments, I would rather, in a lot of ways, see us go and take the game to Real Madrid, even if it means we get beat 5-1, than go there and camp in and have a really, really boring 90 minutes and still lose the game anyway. Like, to me, that's the positive of what I'm just trying to do. We might have had only 2 points out of these 6 games, but I can't honestly say I haven't enjoyed watching any of the games. Like, all the games, apart from the fact you're obviously losing them, have been enjoyable. Whereas I think, as Kevin was saying, and as you were saying with Brendan Rodgers' era, and even further back than that, sometimes you were going into games and getting a scudding, but you weren't even proud of the way that the team were taking it. They were battening down the hatches and still getting pulled to bits, where at least this time you can say, well, we took our chances and then we get picked apart because of it, which that's the way I'd rather see Celtic playing. Will it come to fruition next season or the season after that we have success from it? Remains to be seen. I still think there's a big case that the ability we're able to invest in comparison to these other teams is still going to have a massive impact, but for certain, this has been a much more enjoyable ride than any I've had in the Champions League for years and years.
This is the thing, Kevin. So, in order to progress out of that group, you don't necessarily have to beat a team like Real Madrid. And I think that if you learn your lessons at this level, then when you come up against, I think last season we spoke about the team where I'm not saying we expected to win in the Europa League, albeit a lesser tournament, was Ferencvaros. And I think this time round, the biggest disappointment on reflection will be the 2 games against Shakhtar, where we got a couple of points. You think we should at least got a 4, maybe even 6 points from those 2 games. So it's about learning the lessons, not so that we can beat Real Madrid, because there are certain levels and certain gaps that you just can't compete with. And Real Madrid is probably one of these elite clubs that it's going to be difficult for anyone other than fellow elite clubs to compete with. So we get all that. We're not unrealistic. But it's about being able to know the competition, bring in the standard of player, and approach the games in a certain way whereby we can turn those draws against Shakhtar into wins. We can not just compete with Leipzig for 65 or 75 minutes, but for 90 minutes and maybe get the result that we're looking for. If we look at over the last 6 games in the Champions League, Kevin, I'm going to run through the areas of the park and maybe look at overall, who do you think is going to approach their next challenge like this with more confidence and less anxiety because they've actually, they've performed well at this level? And who do you think still needs to get through that barrier, be it mental or otherwise? So if you're looking at the defence, I think the one player that got a lot of criticism for being a good domestic player but not necessarily in Europe was Greg Taylor. Are you confident that following the 6 games we've just played, he'll go into the next campaign of this type and this kind of standard with a wee bit more confidence, and he won't have any of these anxieties that Ange and Matt O'Reilly have spoken about?
Yeah, I think so. I think Taylor's proven again, and it sounds strange, I think, considering the amount of goals that we've conceded in the end of it. I think the whole defence has almost proven that it's good enough to play at this level if they're given the time and that bit more exposure to it. This was Taylor's first real experience at this level. And he was probably was a bit anxious, nervous to begin with at the start of it, but he's grown into the tournament just like he's grown into the way Ange wants him to play. I got no real issues with him staying at left back. I've been a fan of Taylor for the last, going back at least the last 18 months or so, kind of praising him up, building him up in the system that Ange plays. I think he's our best left back, and I think he deserves to play at this level. I think next season, if he's back here, you'll get another kind of real steady campaign out of him. What
about on the flip side then? Is there anybody in that defence that you think has got a bit to go, Kevin? I mean, I thought Jens, for example, I think Jens has performed pretty well. I think he's done enough that if we have the option to buy him permanently, it's something we should really invest in. And I think that obviously Carter Vickers is another one. Maybe no surprise. I think he's performed well when he's been given the opportunity to do so. But is there a defender in there, or perhaps even Joe Hart, that you think that, come next season, if we do want to progress, we need to strengthen in that area?
That's the key. It's the strengthen part. Because I've looked at all the games and Joe Hart's had these howlers. We know that against Leipzig, but he's made some really good saves as well, some really big saves in games. If we've got the chance to go and sign a goalkeeper that's an upgrade on Joe Hart, though, that's younger, a bit more athletic, can play the ball out from the back a bit more, you take it and you upgrade on him. It's the same at centre back. I cannot remember the lad's name, but the Japanese player that we're looking at as well that's potentially coming in, he could be an upgrade on someone that we've got at the moment. And it's not to say that anybody's performed particularly poorly, because I don't think anyone has. And I think that the mistakes, the key mistakes, have kind of been few and far between. At times we've just been beaten by better teams rather than those poor defensive errors that used to cost us every time. So I don't know so much if anyone's underperformed, but I would like to see us go out and sign what I would class as a proper European level centre back, someone that will go and command the defence. Carter Vickers does it well, but he's inexperienced still at this level. So if you could bring someone in that's possibly an upgrade in Carter Vickers or similar level, but got 2, 3, 4 years of experience of playing at that level behind him, he becomes a better player. And that's where we need to go to. Every signing we make needs to be someone that can improve the first team. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the boy in the jersey just now is underperformed. It just means there's someone better out there. And the chances are there are. And we just need to try and find them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what about yourself then, Laura? If we're looking back over the 6 games and asking the question about who has come out of this probably with a kind of steel of invincibility, thinking, right, I've performed at this level and I'm pretty confident with my performances. And who on the flip side do you think might be a player that we need to improve on if we do want to make the progress that Andrew's spoken about?
I think for the most part, I think there are some players you can say are what I would term stopgap players. Joe Hart, at the age that he's at, for all that he has done for the club, and I have been a big proponent of his, we needed a safe pair of hands in between the sticks after the debacle that was Barkas, etc. Before that. So he's done more than enough, but he's certainly a stopgap. We need a more long-term solution and goal going forward. I think Aaron Moy is similar. He's probably come in because the manager knows him well and he can help get the system across to some of the players who maybe were still struggling a bit with it. But it's clear from tonight and from other situations that he's nowhere near Champions League quality. Not to say that he's a bad player, but he's certainly not at the level that we need. Greg Taylor, for all the plaudits he's had, and I have been one of them giving him those plaudits, I still believe that he's probably a better player than I thought he was, but top end of Europa League for me, not really Champions League, so maybe we need to upgrade in that area. And I would probably say, to be honest, like there's other ones that are not quite at the level that they should be at, but I think could get there. So like your O'Reilly, Hatate, Jota, that level where you can see the potential there if they can just iron out the naiveties and the wee inconsistencies in their game. There are some who've disappointed me though, like Kyogo I expected more from at this level. And I don't know if it's a nervousness thing with him. I don't know if it's a physicality thing because he is small, even though I hate to use that as a criticism. We all saw what happened to me when I did that against Livingston and he scored in 9 minutes. Like, the physicality is only as good as the people that can get near you, but I have been a little bit disappointed by him at this level. And I think possibly looking for another more clinical striker. I think Giacomakis for me actually is more has done more good for his reputation in the Champions League than Kyogo has, and if we could get somebody else of that ilk who can take chances in that way that he did against Shakhtar, then we might stand a better chance. But having said that, I wouldn't say any of the squad in total have been atrocious or anywhere near it. There's just certain levels of player where I think, yeah, you're fine for now, but we're definitely going to need to improve on you in the next season or so.
I think that's a fair comment. I think also, you know, UK, I think, or Yuki is our new signing, incidentally, Kevin. So I think that when we're looking at the Japanese market, if there are still players in there like, for the value for money that we got for Hatate, for example, and Maeda across the board, then yeah, certainly bring them to the club. I mean, we know how much O'Reilly cost. He was a massive investment, and he's proved to be worth every single penny and more. However, you bring in, Carter Vickers and Jota, and I think you are moving into a completely different level of player. And I think Jota showed that tonight. So in terms of the recruitment, are we willing to move into the realms of bringing in 3 or 4 of those players at that price with the increase in wages? And that's where it gets interesting, because that's where the club and the manager has to have the same ambition. Because if you think about Moy being a stopgap, I think you're right, Laura, he definitely has been a stopgap. Right, so if we want to buy someone of the quality of Jota or Carter Vickers, but in Moy's position, all right, that's going to cost you another 6 or 7 million quid. And then it's a case of, okay, are the board going to share that ambition that maybe Ange has? Is that the reason why we brought Moy in? Because there's no way we can buy more than 2 of that type of player in one transfer window, probably. So, I think Ange is going to be patient, and we're going to be patient with him. He still has plenty of credit in the bank. We're saying that after a 5-1 defeat against Real Madrid. Boheed Bob. I'm still trying to figure out who the avatar is. That superhero looks like a chimp superhero. Anybody out there tell me who that is? Who knows?
No idea.
I hope the fans do not smash the team too much. Well, we're not doing that tonight. The foundations are there. Let's get back in again next year and the year after, and see where we are. Well, you're right. I mean, I think, was it Bruges has been getting used as an example of a team that went in, and you were talking about them
That's the one I used last week.
Yep, and it's taken them a while to acclimatise. I mean, I know it's a different kind of level, different tournament, but you even need to look at Scotland being out of any kind of tournament for a generation. But once you break that kind of duck, and once you start getting to the levels that you need to get at just to compete, never mind to do anything in terms of beating the big guns, then it is something you can build on. And I think Celtic can build on what we've achieved this season. I mean, listen, if we're sitting here at the end of the season and we've won a treble, right, you look back on this campaign slightly differently, don't you? You don't look back on it and say, you know what, we're strolling the domestic game, but we're garbage in Europe. You look at it completely differently. You look at this season being an improvement on last season, because we won the double last year, we were in the Europa and the Conference League last year. This year, okay, we had a run in the Champions League, and there's been some disappointments. Jota, our new free kick and penalty taker, Starfelt and Carter Vickers are our number 1 centre-back pairing for me, 100%, says Nihilist Jack, when both fit. And a new goalkeeper as well. By the way, I don't think we were giving Joe Hart a particularly hard time, but if we're looking for areas of the park and saying, you see how their goalkeeper performed tonight, I'm not saying we can buy a goalie like that, but if you can bring someone to the club who ups the levels and bleed them in for next season, then obviously our performances will improve. You mentioned Hatate and O'Reilly, and I think we've agreed on that already, Kevin. Is it a concern though that of the players we've spoken about, albeit Laura, you've given Giakoumakis some credit, is it a concern none of these players are out and out strikers for us, those that have really stepped up to the mark in Europe?
I think the only reason Giakoumakis isn't considered an out-and-out striker for us is just because he doesn't get as much playing time as he maybe should. I think he's about as out-and-out a striker as you could hope for. Like, he comes on and he runs at defences and he's always looking for a goal over and above everything else. He's less interested in setting other people up than doing that. So I think he's fine. I think he could level that criticism more at Abada or something like that. But then this is where me and Jim or butt heads on a Friday. I think we have different ideas of what Abada is. I do see him as a wide player who sometimes likes to cut inside, whereas I think Jim's opinion is he would be more useful through the central, and he really isn't a wide player. So it's to use an old Super Scoreboard phrase, it's all about opinions. But I know it's just difficult. I think what you end up on a night like tonight doing is you end up sort of chastising yourself, because you think it's not the player's fault that I got myself excited about the fact we were playing Real Madrid and thought, oh, maybe we can win. Like, their ability is their ability, regardless of how much I want them to win. And I think that's the kind of thing I'm coming away from tonight with is I'm more than willing to hype Celtic up to the nth degree and follow them wherever and be their biggest hype man, if you want to put it that way. But at the end of the day, like coming down off that high and coming down off the realism of it, you've got to admit that certainly against Leipzig and certainly against Real Madrid, we played two teams who are just still levels away from us, and it's just about trying to be patient and hoping that some of those players that we've got, I said it during the week, you know, instead of selling them before they reach their potential, maybe we can keep them until they reach their potential. Maybe we can keep Ange for a few more years than he would have otherwise wanted to do, and see how far we can take it when they're all firing on all cylinders, because I think that's our biggest issue is we're just not able to hold on to the best players we have for long enough to see what they can do at the truly top level.
I agree with that. I've said it a few times. You know, often we've got 2 or 3 of the right ingredients, but you know, 3 or 4 years later they're gone, and then we bring in another 2 or 3 of the ingredients that you know could really make a difference. I think had we approached tonight's game, Kevin, and we weren't as brave and we didn't stick to the principles that Ange is implementing at Celtic, we wouldn't have seen Abada running at the defender and winning a penalty. We wouldn't have seen Jota scoring that goal because he was brave to win the free kick, which he then converted. We wouldn't have seen these moments. So those 2 players that we've spoke about tonight, they wouldn't have improved as a result of going out there, playing it safe, trying to shut down the opponents. And I'm not saying we went toe-to-toe as such, because that's naive and they will beat you 7-0 or something as embarrassing as that. But what we did do is we were brave, and I think from that, the positives you'll take from that are that Matt O'Reilly will be coming off that park thinking, I can play this level, whereas a year ago he was playing in the third tier of English football. You'll have a Tati who, prior to coming to Celtic, had played something like 80 senior games of football, who, like you say, for the first 60 minutes there, didn't look out of place. You've got Jota, who's got his goal at the Bernabeu. You've got Abada, who's won a penalty. So these brave performances, you've come away with 4 or 5 performers who will improve, and their mentality will improve, and their belief will improve. The anxieties that they might have suffered going into this tournament will diminish and will no longer exist in some cases, Kev. So I think we're in a position as Celtic fans where, yeah, we're giving Ange time. We've got a bond, we've got a relationship with him. I'm looking forward to hearing his post-match. I'm going to bring in a few comments before we wrap up for tonight. Eddie Trainer, time to get a grip, Ange. Wrong team selection, wrong tactics. You ask yourself, though, who do you play? If you're unhappy with Moy, who do you play? You know, if you're unhappy with Starfelt, who goes in there? You know, do you play Tigres instead of Hart? I don't think so. And as I said there, we come away from that game tonight, and there are enough positives. We've just mentioned a few of them. There's going to be players in that dressing room. They'll all be gutted at beaten 5-1. But Jota will be delighted with his goal. Abada will be delighted with his contribution. You know, even a few of the others, Hatati, O'Reilly, they've got to be, you know, happy and satisfied with their performances, Kevin.
Exactly. You know, for me, Laura hit it in the head earlier on when she's saying about how we played the game. And you think, if you're going to lose the game 5-1, would you rather you sat back, tried to park the bus, and were on the defensive for the whole game and still lost the game? Or would you rather that you went out and had a go? And that's what we did tonight. We've went out, we've had a go, we've tried to play our game. There's a few key words that get mentioned, and they need to be repeated often enough because they're true. We need to have patience with Ange, that the development will continue to come, and we'll use Club Brugge as the example of a team that took a few seasons to get used to playing at the Champions League, and now look at them. They belong there. God, I forgot what else I was going to say in that one now. But, you know, but there's just a lot. There's actually a lot of positives that come from this. Mentality was the other one, sorry. The mentality that we have tonight now, it's not we're a small Scottish team that should come here and take our hiding and go home and be happy with it. It's no, we're a side that wants to prove that we deserve to be at this level, and we're going to try and play like a team that plays at this level. We're not that team yet, and maybe next season we won't be that team either, but maybe next season we'll finish third and we'll get dropped down into the Europa League and we'll get our European football after Christmas, and then the next again season. We've just got to keep on believing, and that's basically what it comes down to. You believe, you trust the process, you have the positive mentality that what you're doing is right, and you just keep on building season to season, and it will come. It will come. The fact that we've had the braveness to go out there in the Bernabeu play the way we did, and take the result, but still come away with it thinking, do you know what? It wasn't all doom and gloom. There are positives to take from it. That's an improvement.
Aye.
The other thing I was going to say, Paul, was I've been on the show. I started in October 2020 coming on the show. And we all know the midst of the absolute mess we were in at that time, and coming on here and spouting off about the fact that we couldn't beat a Jim Goodwin St Mirren side and all of that kind of stuff, and thinking to myself, forget the Champions League. I don't know when we'll even see a team win a league again. Like that was the point I had got to. If Neil Lennon was going to stay in charge, here we are 2 years later, a little bit disappointed that we didn't take something off Real Madrid. That is the difference in expectation, the difference in level in only a couple of years.
Yeah.
And the thing is, as well, is that's the difference when you've got a manager who is obviously backed by the board, who obviously controls the strings as far as who the recruitment is about, who's obviously number one at the club in terms of who everything needs to run by. I think if you give Ange another 2 years, if he hopefully stays, I mean, the trajectory's been like that already. Who knows where it could go in the next 2 years? And we could be sitting here in 2 years' time saying, you know, that year that we were in the group stages with Real Madrid was the first time we saw a glimpse of what was possible, and here it's possible now. So, I mean, I don't mean to get everybody's hopes up again, but like, who knows? 2 years' time, we could be even further forward if we can hold on to the quality that we've got.
It's about continuous improvement. You're right, and I think that there's a job that Ange has started, and I don't think he's anywhere near finishing it yet. We're 18 months into that job. Interesting that you've been 2 years yourself, Laura. Quite a few highs and lows in that 2 years for sure. And one of the highs tonight was Jota's goal. What about his reaction to that? He was very emotional. It was great to see. It gave the Celtic fans who travelled over to Spain a wee bit of enjoyment at the end of the game as well. Craig M scored a belter at the Bernabeu. Take a bow, Jota. Belter of a goal, says Stevie Boy. Great solo effort. Fans were superb. Let's leave it at that. The fans were superb. Every single travelling Celtic fan who have gone over there and represented Celtic over the last couple of days. JP's over there. I hope he enjoyed the game as well. He won't be joining me on the bulletin tomorrow as a result of that. But yeah, all about the goal, all about the positives, and we move on to our next domestic game. Got to thank everybody for getting involved. We're only 5 followers, or subscribers rather, away from hitting the, where are we, 19.8 thousand on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't hit that subscribe button for any reason, just hit it now. We've got lots of big stuff coming up, particularly the charity weekender, which will be used to promote the release of our charity single. Yes, we are assaulting the UK charts, hopefully, this Christmas with a song called The Glory in the Dream. So get subscribing so you can see the video and all that once it's launched. It's sounding absolutely fantastic, isn't it, Laura? That was a leading question. That was a leading question, wasn't it?
Well, no, it was great. Listen, if you think Bob the Builder versus Westlife was a big battle for the Christmas #1, you're about to see something special, folks. I can tell you that. Absolutely,
yes. And we will be releasing it and revealing the artwork, the video and the song in the next 6 weeks or so. So thank you ever so much for getting involved in the chat. Don't be too disheartened. We are in a process here that we do believe in Ange, and hopefully we can continue to improve. All that's left for me to say, Kevin McCluskey, Laura Bradburn, thank you again for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul.